Do you ever struggle when it comes time to arrange embellishments on your craft projects? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. Today, I want to talk about some of the guidelines that I personally keep in mind as I go to arrange embellishments on a craft project. I saw these Die Cuts with a View in American Crafts tag set at Joann Fabric and Crafts, and I thought that it would be like a fun opportunity to create some embellishments that I could use on future cards and just really focus on the how to choose embellishments process and give you some specific tips. So it came with 15 tags, some foam squares to pop things up, the twine for the top of the tags, and a whole bunch of ephemera. So there's 213 pieces. I thought it might be a good time to share something like this because, you know, things like this kind of tend to go on sale before the season or after the season. So if you thought this would be like a good way to kind of get a head start on your Christmas cards for next year. I have made 5 of the 15 tags so that I can talk about some of my tips for embellishing. There's plenty more embellishments included in the kit to make at least 10 more tags, but I think I could use them on several other cards as well. I want to highlight why I think these tips work by using these tags as examples. However, I do also want to say that these are just guidelines. It's not like if you do something that's opposite of what I'm saying, your card will look bad. I'm not trying to say that in any means. If you feel like you're struggling, try some of these tips. See if that gives you a result that you like better. And if not, you like what you're doing, by all means, keep doing it. Or if you find a tip doesn't work for you, maybe, take what works and leave the rest. So tip number 1 is to overlap embellishments. So you can see I'm doing that here, like with the presents. I've created kind of more of like a grouping or scene of presents by overlapping them with each other. Or the trees here, they look like a forest of trees because they're overlapping. The bear is kind of coming in front of the Christmas tree, and then the sentiment is overlapping them both, making everything tie in together rather than keeping everything separate. Now, of course, over here, none of the stars are touching really any of the other elements. And so it's not that you can never do the opposite or do something different than making them all overlap, but just something to consider that tends to look good. Number 2, use an odd number of elements. So here there's 3 trees, 3 presents, 3 stars. But even just using one thing, like there's one focal point hedgehog, tends to work. And you can, of course, extend it out to 5 or 7 if you have much smaller things. And not to say that pairing 2 things, because you could kind of argue that the bear and the tree are just 2 things, but maybe the sentiment brings it into 3 or something like that. It's, but just when you're trying to make like a group of things, I think that the 3 presents or the 3 trees looks a little better than just the 2 may have. It just tends to be appealing to us. Number 3, use your sentiment as anchors. And I did that on all of these tags here where all of especially here when I've created these 2 little like scenes, I've anchored them with their sentiments on the bottom. But I did that here as well. Even though the hedgehog is actually the highest element, just putting that sentiment there on the bottom gives that a place for your eye to kind of like come to and rest. Number 4, repeat elements or colors. So by repeating the stars, repeating the Christmas trees. Here, I should point out another way. I have this circle that the sentiment is on. It repeats the circles that are in the background of the tag. It also has the same color. So having the pink here and in the background, it can kind of help pull it back into the card, the scene, whatever it is that you're working on. Number 5, add dimension. There's a reason that using like foam tape is very popular. They included some foam tape in this kit. I do tend to use scraps of cardstock. So I actually didn't even use the foam tape that it came with. I put some scraps of cardstock behind my elements, and what I do with that is I just take spare bits of cardstock and I glue them together till I have a thickness. I like this because it gives me something to do with my scraps of cardstock, and because it's a little bit thinner than foam tape, it's just enough to add a little bit of dimension, which can work out well when you want to keep your cards easy to mail. And it also sometimes can mean that you can add a couple of layers of dimension on a card. Like you could, pop up one thing with just one layer and then take 2 pieces to pop up the next thing, and you can add a bit more dimension without getting a really, really thick card, but the cardstock can start to get heavier than foam tape. So things to consider. Number 6, use a variety of sizes. So if you're going to use some large things, adding in some smaller things as well to complement it. So that's kind of what's going on here with the stars and the hedgehog. The hedgehog is large, the stars are smaller, or this here where I have like the really large sentiment, but I've mixed in some smaller bits. Even kind of this, like it is one big flower, but you can see that the designer has chosen to include some large flowers and some small flowers. So it's very common in floral arrangements too, is to add a variety of sizes. It just looks good. Number 7, break boundaries. And what I mean by that is have your elements come off of their background a little bit. I totally understand not wanting them to come off the side of the card because you want it to fit in an envelope, but say I were going to put this on top of a card, I have broken the boundary of the tag by causing this frame and these florals to overlap it a little bit. So you can break boundaries within the card base, but like by making it come a little bit outside of a piece of patterned paper, a chunk of patterned paper that you're using, or outside of a frame or something like that. I think I have done that on all of these. There's something hanging off the edge of each tag, and that just makes it feel a little bit more dynamic. Sometimes if you do want to do this, but you can't have it overhanging like you need it to fit in the envelope, you can still consider that having it overhanging like these presents and then cutting it off, but still look like it extended beyond the scene, still can somewhat achieve the same look, just so that not everything's boxed in. So you can cut off the extras and still use that rule if that's what's best for your project situation. Just again, a reminder, not saying you ever have to do any of these, just some little ideas that if you feel like your elements aren't quite popping the way you want, try one of these. Number 8 would be to contrast the colors. So I made this tag a little bit more monochromatic with trees in the foreground and a green background so that you could see what that means is that it allows the sentiment and the hedgehog to pop out a little bit more. They're immediately what your eye goes to as opposed to what's going on in the background. So doesn't mean that every color has to contrast with every other color in the scene, but when you lay something that is the same color on top of, even if it's different shades of the same color, it might not be as noticeable, but then it allows you to take another, like a third element and make it really stand out because you will notice it more than the things that are all the same color. And so you might see that a monochromatic card will then have one thing that's in a different color and it really stands out, really makes it shine. So you want to kind of consider how your colors are contrasting with each other to make sure things stand out. It's often also while you might see a white border. So like these packages do not have a white border, but these flowers do, or the hedgehog does, and that allows there to be a little bit more like possible contrast with the background. Whereas if they had cut it right to the edges, like here, putting this present on a green background would be a lot less noticeable. So there were some red presents. I intentionally didn't choose them because I wanted the whole little grouping to stand out. Number 9 would be to consider the balance. So you can intentionally put all of your elements on one piece of the tag and put a heavy amount there, and it will look perhaps unbalanced because there's a lot of white space somewhere else. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you want to do that intentionally. So either putting all of the weight, visual weight is what I mean by that, on one piece, or balancing out so that there isn't a blank space. So here with the hedgehog, his eyes are closed, so he's not really looking anywhere. It looks like their eyes are closed. I don't know. Is it a girl hedgehog, a boy hedgehog? Does it matter? Anyway, if I didn't put these stars on there, it would kind of be like looking off that way, and there's not maybe anything to look to. So by adding the stars, I've kind of pulled you a little bit back into the scene by balancing out what would have been blank space all around the hedgehog. So that's an example of what I might mean by balancing. And then 10 is, and this one you've probably heard, and I'm sure you've heard many of these other ones before as well, but I just thought it might be nice to kind of compile them into one video, is to create visual triangles. So that's what I've done with these stars. It's a little bit what I've done with these presents, so that none of them are lined up, and so the bows the center of the bows kind of create a triangle. And again here with the stars. So creating visual triangles allows your eye to keep bouncing around the tag or card or whatever it is, and then, help you to kind of notice everything and draw some attention to it. And that does sort of complement the using odd numbers rule. So a lot of times you'll see 3 because 3 is an odd number, which is kind of appealing to our eye design-wise for some reason. And it often allows you to create a visual triangle. So those are my 10 tips for how to add embellishments in a way that feels interesting and looks good on cards. They are overlap embellishments, use an odd number of elements, use sentiments as anchors, repeat elements and colors, add dimension, use a variety of sizes, break boundaries, contrast the colors, consider the balance, and create visual triangles. I will also make a list in the video description, so I'll just number 1, and I'll just write it real quick so that you can have that as a handy little reference if you need it as well. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.